I'm Max Lopez, and this is Blue Wave. We have a clip here from Mediaite of a conservative CNN commentator completely missing the mark on criticism of the media when it comes to their treatment and coverage of the former President Donald Trump's campaign, and how it's very not evenly handed in how much criticism Harris and Walz get versus how much criticism Trump gets. And he really just fails to kind of realize the problem people have with mainstream media's coverage of Donald Trump, and really kind of just shows a real lack of understanding where people are coming from when they express discontent with how the media treats Harris versus Trump and how normalized Donald Trump has become, mainly due to how the media has decided to cover him. But before we do that, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with someone who's into politics, and let's jump into the clip here.
Take this seriously.
Yeah, I know, but when he is airing his authoritarian impulses, is what he is saying. He's just putting it out there, and he's basically letting the voters know that, you know, this is what you're voting for. And I guess my question is why has the vice president not done enough to call it out, to go after it? Do the Democrats need to do more in calling it out?
I'm going to be honest with you, Jim. I think the media has not done enough to call this out. I mean, where are the front page New York Times stories and other newspapers over and over again? They ran stories about how Joe Biden was too old. He had to get out. Over and over and over again. It saturated the mass media market to the extent that everybody knew that Joe Biden was really, really old. But here you have a fascist. And General Milley is right, because all the markers of a fascist exist in Donald Trump. And yet our news media has not done enough by any stretch of the imagination to call this out. You know, Kamala Harris can call this out every day, but if it's not covered, if people keep asking on 60 Minutes something like, why did the vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, why did he say he was in Tiananmen Square or anywhere in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square, over and over again, as opposed to actually asking questions that matter to the voters. And this is something that really matters to the voters. I got to put the onus on the media as well.
Sure, Michael.
We've covered this a lot. I can pull up right now on my smartphone, Google Donald Trump and some of his rhetoric, and you'll see it there. Vice President Harris has talked about it. Joe Biden attempted to run his campaign when he was running, and it didn't move the needle. And it didn't move the needle because the average American person, I would argue, based on focus group data, based on polls, they're looking at the economy, they're looking at immigration, and they're saying, Jim, that
I would say we do cover it. I mean,
no, we do cover it. They would say,
I mean, we do cover it. Yeah,
there are more important things that they're worried about. They know who Donald Trump is, and a lot of people are saying, you know what, I would rather deal with someone who I know, who I believe is more competent on the issues that are most important. Some people may not like that, but to say that we haven't covered it, I wouldn't agree with that. We have covered it. I just think there are far more consequential issues that impact people day-to-day lives, and that's what they're voting on.
Take a look at the ratio with all. Take a look at the ratio. You haven't cut. I'm not talking about your show, Jim. Actually, you've been doing a very good job on this. But I would say the media at large, the ratio just does not exist.
I think you could do a segment, what if Biden said it? You know, WIBSI, you know, what if Biden said it? You know, if Biden were out there saying the enemy within.
But Jim,
I mean, when you say, sure, Michael, there would be howls coming
but Jim,
from.
I just think in many ways we're scapegoating here, right? And so I feel like if the vice president doesn't win in November, then Democrats will say, oh, well, the media didn't cover it. They allowed Donald Trump. That's nonsense. We have covered this. People are just more concerned about other issues. And I don't buy into that. And I think it's very dangerous to blame the media. And look, there's a lot we can criticize the media on, but I think a lot of great reporters out there are doing a darn good job to cover this election as fairly as they possibly can. Right, and so if Dems don't win this thing, you can't just blame it on the media for saying that our candidate and our side didn't do enough.
All right, we'll talk about this. But Michael, Julie, great conversation.
All right, so this guy very accurately points out the media does cover Donald Trump's rallies and what he says, and kind of how crazy and off the wall that the things Donald Trump says can be. that coverage does exist, but the thing that this guy is completely missing is that the media, they do this thing where they normalize Donald Trump's rhetoric and his talking points and his campaign generally by putting it up against Harris's campaign as some sort of, that we still have two political parties and this is a battle of party versus party and a battle of ideals and a battle of political policy, when in fact we know that this is a battle for our democracy itself, right? We know that Donald Trump will do everything he can to make it so that there is never an election ever again in this country, or not one that's meaningful anyways. And what the media does is they'll cover Donald Trump's antics, but then it's immediately followed up with but what about Kamala Harris? But what about Tim Walz? Right? And it creates this idea in the minds of voters that these are two candidates on equal footing that are both representing different ideas going at each other, right? When it really is a battle of fascism versus democracy. And it's as dramatic as that. And the media very often waters down that reality with contrasting and comparing Donald Trump's statements with statements that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have made. And it's contributed quite a bit to this both side-ism that a lot of American voters have. And this is perhaps by design, right? Get American voters to think that both parties are the same and that there's going to be no progress made either way, that it doesn't really matter because both parties are only apart just a little bit here and there on some specific issues. No. Kamala Harris represents democracy, represents what we've had in this country for over 200 years. Trump wants to rip that away and change us into a nation that looks and operates much more like somewhere like North Korea or Russia or China. That's how stark and contrast the differences are between these two candidates. And by giving equal time to going after fact-checking both sides, Trump is normalized in the eyes of Americans as a normal candidate. And comparing Tim Walz's statements about being in Tiananmen Square when he was in fact in Hong Kong, comparing something like that, a misstatement or something that was proven to not be completely accurate, to Donald Trump lying about the results of a free and fair election. I think that those are two quite very, very different things. It's the same thing when they criticize Harris. They bring up these policy points. In 2019, you said this or that, and now you're saying something different. Why is that? Have you changed? Can the American people trust you? Some minute policy detail that Harris may have changed here or there, but it's like, look at the other side here. Okay, Trump was a freaking Democrat, liberal New Yorker, because that's what he thought would gain him the most clout and in the business world in New York City. Is he went along with Bloomberg and with all sorts of different Democrats and was a total literal registered Democrat and voted Democrat for years and years and years until he saw an opportunity to seize power through manipulating and lying to people through the in the form of a presidential campaign running as a Republican, right? The very instant that in Donald Trump's mind, his likelihood of winning the election went from 50% to 51%, being a Republican at 51%, he switched, right? Like, I imagine it was like quite literally the very instant he realized that he would have a better chance of winning as a Republican than as a Democrat. Okay, switch over. Boom. That's it. I'm not, so it shows that Trump, he doesn't really have any ideals. He doesn't really have anything that he believes in. He's a total chameleon, right? In terms of what he stands for, and what he stands for changes based on the voters he's trying to attract, or the people he's trying to impress in the room, or whatever else thing that Donald Trump thinks is the most important thing for him to be doing at the very moment, right? He'll totally change his beliefs on the drop of a dime for the sake of power. And his whole switch over to republicanism and conservatism was, we could see it from a mile away. People could see it from a mile away. Oh, wow, this guy's hungry for power and is taking an opportunity of a lack of a strong candidate in the field in 2016, and a real distaste with establishment politics. And he took his opportunity and he ran with it, and he, lo and behold, won the damn election. But we never hear anything about that. We never hear anything about that in the mainstream media. But we'll hear about Harris's policy points from XYZ year that have changed, But yeah, so when she's talking about the ratio, and she was saying there, she kind of got cut off, but by Jim Acosta, but she was saying the ratio of coverage is not the same, right? You can't cover Donald Trump's antics and present them to the American people as a legitimate contrast to Kamala Harris, who is standing for democracy. And then, when you're criticized for that, say, oh, well, people are just trying to scapegoat. People are trying to make excuses for if Harris loses in November, they want to have a scapegoat. I mean, that's the last of anybody's worries on the left right now. So that's all I got for you guys in this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with someone who's into politics. Be sure to get out there and vote in this upcoming 2024 election here in November. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.